Once you load the project into your own App Inventor account, it will be loaded into your projects, and this is what it looks like. So we've got a little bit of instructions. You're going to answer as many math questions as you can in 20 seconds. It wants you to enter your name and press the start button. And if you look here, we've got two arrangements. We've got the start arrangement, which has the instructions, the user text box, and the start button. And then we've got this quiz arrangement, which is currently not visible, but if we make it visible, and I'll make this one invisible so you can see it. So what it's going to do is put up a math equation here. You're going to type the answer, hit submit, and it will tell you whether you're correct or incorrect. That's currently invisible until you actually start the quiz. So let me go back and make that invisible again. I'll do a little demo here. So I've got this running in my emulator. Let me let's refresh the companion screen. Oh, you know what I did? I didn't make this visible again. Okay, so let's start here. All right, so let's run it. So if I type in my name, start, and I can start answering the questions. -3. I'll get a wrong answer, so if I hit submit, we'll say incorrect. It told me I got 5 correct answers in that 20 seconds. And then it takes me back here, and I can play it again if I want. Okay, so that is the demo. Let's go to the blocks and take a look. So we have several variables which will be used. I'll go over those as we go through the code. So let's start with the start button. So when the user presses the start button, it asks them for their name if they haven't typed it in. So it checks, is the user text box empty? If it is, it tells them they have to enter their name. It will hide the start arrangement box and open up the quiz. That's why we'll see the quiz starting. Resets the score to 0. It will call this new question function or procedure, and that will put up a new question, so we'll go over that in a minute. And then it's going to set the timer, so it's going to start the countdown for 20 seconds. So let's look at new question. It takes num1 and num2, and it's going to generate 2 random numbers from 1 to 20. So both of those will be a random number. And then for the addition, we're going to either have an addition problem or a subtraction. What we're doing is generating a random number from 1 to 2, and if it's 1, we'll say it's addition. So this is going to generate a true if the random integer is 1, and a false if it's a 2. So we'll say if addition's true, it's an addition problem. If addition is false, it'll be a subtraction problem. So now we can set the question, and we're going to set it with a join. So we're going to take number 1, the first number, and then we have this little test. If it's addition, we're going to put a plus sign, otherwise we'll put a minus sign, and then the second number. And then we need to calculate the answer, so we can check later if it's correct or incorrect, what the user has typed. If it's an addition problem, add the 2 numbers together, otherwise we'll subtract them. And then let's set the answer text, which is where the user types their answer, to blank, so they can type in a new answer. Okay, let's go down now. When the user presses submit after they typed in an answer, we can just then check. So this is the answer we've calculated up here, and we're comparing it to the user's answer. If it's correct, we're going to set the result label. We'll turn it green to say that's the correct answer, and we'll set the text to say correct, and we'll add 1 to the score. Otherwise, let's set the background to red, tell them they're incorrect, and generate a new question. So we'll just keep generating questions continuously until the clock timer fires, and it's set to 20 seconds. So after 20 seconds, it will fire, so we'll come to this event. First thing we'll do is disable the clock so it won't keep counting down, so it would start over again. We'll set the visibility of the quiz arrangement to false, so that we'll hide that again, and we'll make this one visible so the start arrangement is visible again. And then we'll just put up a notifier telling them what their score was. So you got so many correct answers, and then they just hit the OK button. And then they're back to the start and they can start again. What we're going to do now, though, is we've got this quiz quick quiz, and what we're going to do is add the capability of storing the high scores for each user. So we have the user type in their name, and the reason for that is we're going to save it in a Google Sheet, and then they can try to play against their best high score and try to beat it. What we need to do is to add a Google Sheet to our project. In order to use Google Sheets, there's a few steps we have to take first. I'm going to go to this website, developers.google.com. If you don't have a Google developer account, it will ask you to create one. I've got one, so I'm all set. And what you're going to do is, once you've signed up, go to the console, which is just put the word console in front of developers, so console.developers.google.com. These are my existing projects, but I'm going to create a new project. You should have a button, I believe, somewhere up here that will say create new project. So new project, and I will call mine quick quiz. The organization, you could probably just put Technovation in here. So now we've got our quick quiz, our new project. And now what I'm going to do is go to APIs and services. And I want to enable, and the API we want to enable is Google Sheets. So if I search for it, I just search for Sheet. I can enable it. And enable. Okay, now it's enabled that, and what we can do now is click on Create Credentials. And the API we're using is Google Sheets API. Okay, and what we're going to be accessing is application data. So we can just click Next, and we want to create a service account. You can give any name for this, so I'm going to call this Sheet Service. And we'll just say Google Sheet Access to API. And let's create and continue. And we need to select a role, and so we need to give them editor, because we need to be able to read and write from this. So it'll be editor, continue. And we can click done. Back to the credentials, let's just check. Alright, so let's click on this and just edit it, because we just have to set the key to make sure. Add a key, create a new key, and we want it to be a JSON. And notice that it's downloading this file here to my computer, and I'm going to need that JSON file, so make sure that you save that. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to go to Google Drive. So let's go to Google Drive, and I'm going to make a new Google Sheet, create and share. I'll call my quiz scores. And for this, all we're going to do is have the name of the person and their high score. So I'm going to put high underscore score. And I'll just bold them and center them. Okay, so those two headings. And let me call this quiz scores again. And now what we want to do is go to File, Share, Share with Others. Okay, these are all Technovation people. So what I'm going to do is add my service account. So I go back here. If I go back here to my credentials, I can copy this. Copy. And this is who I'm going to share it with. Okay, and they can be an editor. I don't need to notify them because that's not a real person. And I will share it. And you shouldn't get these messages because you're not part of an organization like Technovation, but we'll say share anyway. Okay, so now that is shared. Okay, so now let's go back to App Inventor. Let's go down to Storage, and we've got Spreadsheet, and we're going to add that. Okay, so it has added it. So now what we need to do is applications called Quick Quiz, our credentials JSON. So that's what we've got to upload, the one that just got downloaded. So let me upload the file. And I found this one, the quick quiz that just got downloaded. And we'll click OK. So now that is attached. And then the spreadsheet ID is, if we go back here, the ID is this big long number in here. Okay, so it's after the /d and before the edit. So it's this big long number. So let's go back, put that in. Now that we've got our Google spreadsheet set up and linked to our project, let's go to the blocks and see what we need to do. The end of the quiz happens here in the clock timer event, and that's where we kind of stop everything and put up a message with the notifier telling the user what their score was. We want to link this with Google Sheets, so we want to first check, is this person in our Google spreadsheet? If they aren't, we're going to add them. If they are, we're going to check their current high score and compare it to this new score and tell them whether or not it's higher or not and update it if it is higher. Let's take this message out for now because we're going to put up a message, but it'll probably be different now depending upon the situation. What we want to do is go and read what we currently have in our spreadsheet and look for this user. So I'm going to go to spreadsheet, and there's many blocks. These are all blocks that are events. When Google Sheets returns something, we want to read, and we're going to read the entire sheet. Because this is just 2 columns, there's not a lot of data, so we'll say let's read the whole sheet. And the default sheet is sheet 1. So if we go back, if we go up to our quiz scores, the name of the sheet, if we see at the bottom, is called sheet 1. So you can have multiple sheets in the spreadsheet. We're going to read the sheet, and then in the spreadsheet component, there are events for when Google Sheets returns the information. So when it says got the sheet data. So the idea is that it has to go out to Google Sheets, and there is a time lag. So it waits until it gets the information back before it lets you proceed. And you proceed by using this event. So it calls it, comes back, and now we can say, okay, we've got the sheet data. What do we want to do with it? What it's going to look like is, and I'm going to quickly build this. The spreadsheet is, a bunch of rows, so I might have each of these rows is considered, in App Inventor, it will be a list. So what we're going to get from reading the sheet data is a list of lists, and I can show you what that will look like here. So I'm going to make a list. When we get this back sheet data, it's going to look something like this, a list of lists. So one big list is the whole Google Sheet, sheet 1, and within that each row is another list of each of the cells. We want to look through this big list, and then within that, once we get a smaller list, we want to look at the first item, which will be the person's name, and we want to see if we can find it. I am going to make a variable. And I'm going to call it index, or let's call it row. The row, and I'm going to set it to 0. This is going to point to the row. What we need to do now is we need to look through this entire sheet data, so which is this big list, and we're looking for the username, which will be the first item of the smaller list. To do this, we're going to use a for loop, and what I'm going to do is use a for each so we can count. I'm going to call this index. And we're going to go from 1 to, instead of 5, it's going to be the length of the list. And the list is the sheet data. As we go through, I'm going to test if I'm going to first pull out the list and get the first item. So I'm going to say select list item, and the larger list is sheet data, and the index is going to be this index. And then once I've got that, then I can say get the first item out of that list, right? So this will give me this, and I still need to pull out the first item. So I need another select list item. And that now is my list, and the index for that is the first one. So it's a little confusing. So because we've got a list of lists, first we grab the list from within the list, and then that's a list, and we pull the first item out of it. And if that is equal to our user text box text, that's where the user typed their name in. So if that's a match, we found them. So if we found them, let's save that index. So we've got this row variable, and that's going to tell us what row they're in. So we're going to say set row to the index that we're at. And then what we can do is there's this other thing that we don't need to keep looking. So there's this break we can use, and that will break us out of this loop. We don't need to keep looping. And then we don't actually need the else, so I can remove the else. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure each time, because we can run this multiple times, I'm going to make sure each time I set row to 0. Because what's going to happen is if we get through this loop and index and row is still 0, that means that we did not find that user in the list. So that's what we're going to do now, is now we'll have another if. So we've looked through the whole thing and we've either found them and set row to the index and broken out of the loop, or row is still 0. So now I can say if row is still equal to 0, that means that the user's not in the list, and what we want to do is let's write their information in. So we're going to add a row to sheet 1, and the data is going to be a list, just like this gives us back a list. So a list will look like this, the username and their score. So let's make a list. It will be the user's text. I don't need this anymore. I hope you get this idea. So I'm going to actually, let me just move it out of the way so we don't need to look at it. And then, so we've got the user text and then their score. So their score is going to be their new high score that goes into the spreadsheet. In the case that we found them, row will be something other than 0, and it will point us to which row that user is in. So then we want to check their score and compare their past high score to their current score. So we'll have another if. In this case, we want to use a math logic because we want to check if it's greater. Is their score greater than, and we need to pull out their score. This block of code pulled out their username, and we're going to let's just duplicate this. But instead of index, it's going to be row, because we've saved that. And instead of the first item, we want the second item, and that's their score. If their current score is greater than, and we've got the big list, we know their row, and we want the second item in that row. So if their score is greater than that, that means that they've got a new high score. We want to update their row in the spreadsheet. So what we can do is we want to write a row. And the row number is going to be row. And the data is going to be the user again, the user text box text and their score. Otherwise, we're just going to put up a message. You didn't exceed your previous high score. So now we've got the 3 situations, and these 2 involve adding a row or writing a row, and they're going to return events. So let's pull out those events because we want to wait for those events to happen. We're going to look for finish adding a row, which corresponds to this event, and then the other one is finish writing a row, finished write row. Those 2 events we want to take place before we put up a message. And then we're going to also let them continue with the rest of the game. So we've got our 3 situations. We've got our different events that are going to happen. And for each of those, we're going to be doing something like this. We're going to do this show choose dialog. The reason I use this is because this will pause until the user responds by clicking one of these buttons before it continues. And because people are playing the game, it's writing out to Google Sheets, there's a lot of time lag, so we want to make sure that it pauses until the user presses a button. What I want to do is, instead of having this block and then the show and hide of the 2 arrangements in each of 3 places, I'm going to make a single procedure and just call it procedure. You can do it the other way, but this is a little more efficient and organized. So we're going to call this show message and restart. And we will put in a message in here. However, this message is going to be different each time. So what I'm going to do is make this an input and call it message. And then what we can do is call the message. And then in all cases, it will say quiz over with one button text called OK. Let's take this case first. So in this case down here, the message is going to be, so what we can do is call this with the message. And the message will be, you got this score, you did not beat your previous high score of. And now that I'm seeing this, I'm thinking, oh, we might want to have the high score saved as a variable. So let's do that. So I'm going to do high score. I will set it to 0. And let's make sure we set it to 0 each time we run it, just to kind of be safe. But then we can say duplicate it, and we'll put it into a variable, and then we can just check the variable. That way we can access it out here in some of these other events. So we're setting the high score, and then we're checking it. Okay, so now in this I can go ahead and say, and I'll put high score. This will be the message in this case where they did not beat their previous high score. Okay, and I'll duplicate this, and I will say, in this case, after they've written a row, you did beat it. So we can say you beat your previous high score, and this is after we finish writing the new score to the spreadsheet. And then in this case, where we're adding a row, this is the case where it's the first time they're playing. We don't have a high score, so I'll take that out. And then we can say something like, this is your new score to beat. And what I wanted to do is also, in this case, this is where I want to show and hide these two arrangements. So before we did it up here, so let's bring this down here so we can see it. I'm actually going to put everything to false, hide everything, while we do all of this reading and writing to the spreadsheet. And then what I can do is here, after they've responded, I'm going to set that to false. It's a bit redundant, and then I will set this to true, and then they can play again. Now the other thing, as I mentioned, is this is going to take a few seconds, and there will be a lag with the game. Another nice thing we can do is go back to the designer. I'm going to just make this visible again so we can see it. App Inventor has this little circular progress, which is one of those kind of spinning wheels that at least tell you something's going on. I'm going to add that. I'm going to put it in right between these two arrangements so it won't interfere with either of them. I'm going to make it invisible to start, and then I'm also going to go back and change quiz arrangement so that's invisible. Now what we can do is, first thing I'm going to do is set the visibility to true when the quiz ends. So first thing is we're going to kind of stop everything, and I'll turn this on so they can see it. And then here I can hide it again as I uncover the start arrangement again. Pretty much everything is done here, so we can close it off. So I think that will also help with the way things look. So let's see if we can get this to run again. So let's see if we can connect to the emulator. Let's start the game. So I'll type in my name and start playing. Okay, quiz over. You got 8 correct answers. You did not beat your previous high score of 10. Oh, that's why. I forgot that I had filled this in to show you what this would look like. So let's clear this again. Well, that's good that it found my name and it realized I didn't beat my previous high score. So let's go back and assume we've got a clean slate, and I will start again. So let's okay, so you get 8 correct answers. This is your new score to beat, and now I should be in there with an 8. We saw the case where it said I didn't beat it, so I'm going to make this a smaller thing to make sure that I do beat it. So the nice thing about Google Sheets is that you can go ahead and manipulate the data and do some testing. So let's start again, and so if I can beat 3, it should update it. You got 7 correct answers. You beat your previous high score of 3. So now it should have updated it with 7, which it did. You can have other people play as well. So I could, a new player, and it should add that person as well. So you can have multiple players. You got 8 correct answers. This is your new score. So Joan should now be added, and she is. That takes care of checking one person's personal high score against their current score. So a new challenge for you is you have hopefully several people playing your game, and they all have a high score. Could you add some code to what we currently have to find out who has the highest score out of the whole list? You've got that sheet data, so you could potentially look through and look for the highest score, compare all the scores, and then there's a couple of things you could do. You could, in the game, you could have some sort of a label, try to beat so-and-so's high score, put the number here, and then also you could add something to the message at the end saying, oh, you beat the high score for everyone, or you did not, something like that. This is your challenge. Add something that looks for the overall high score and do some messaging with it, either through a label or using the notifier. Okay, so there's your challenge. Good luck. I look forward to seeing what people come up with.